Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our session about youth and artificial intelligence. My name is Yasmina Byrne. I'm head of policy in UNICEF Office of Global Insight and Policy based in New York. And thank you all for coming today. We are unfortunate to have actually a session at the same time as my other colleagues from UNICEF are having Global Kids Online launch. But we have a sizable crowd here of people who I hope are interested in what we're going to talk about today. And I'm not going to be very long with the introduction. I just wanted to say, we heard here during the past few days at the IGF 30 years mentioned a couple of times in the context of 30 years of the fall of the Berlin Wall, 30 years of the birth of the World Wide Web. But we're also celebrating another anniversary this year, and that's 30 years of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And when we talk about children and their rights and the digital age, the next 30 years are going to actually show significant differences in children's lives, and particularly in this case driven by the development of AI technologies and AI systems. So today's session is co-organized with Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University and our office in UNICEF. And first speaker today is Sandra Cortese, who is the Director of Youth and Media Program. After her, we'll hear from my colleague Steve, and we'll have a few other colleagues who are going to give a brief commentary, and I hope we have some time to discuss this very important topic. We only have an hour, so let's start.
Thank you so much, Jasmina. I'm delighted to be here with lots of friends and colleagues. I'm going to use my 10-ish minutes basically to share with you an overview of what we have been up to at Youth and Media at Berkman Klein for the last 2.5 years. Let's see if the slides, now you can only see me and not my slides. Aha. Voilà. Thank you. So about 2.5 years ago at Berkman Klein, we started a larger center-wide project on the ethics and governance of AI. And our approach was very much to basically have a reflection and conversation about how AI can be integrated into each existing project rather than create a whole new project. But I must admit, I was not an AI expert whatsoever at that point. And so I had to educate myself really basically from scratch. And first of what I did was start with a basic Google search about AI. And this is what comes out when you do a visual search on AI. I'm a very visual person, as you can probably tell from my slides. And that I didn't find helpful whatsoever as a starting point. But I said it's interesting in itself. What is AI to the larger world? It's something blue with robots, most male-looking robots. But then I did, again, obviously, a larger search and went through all the big reports talking about AI and noticed even while looking at those at the very early stage that most of them did not include youth issues within the reports. Youth were rarely mentioned, and I think Steve is going to go into more detail into that. It has become better, so at the top you see a few examples of newer reports that talk about young people within the bigger AI frameworks. But nevertheless, the information was scarce. And so what we then did at Youth and Media is we spent about a year trying to collect all the evidence we could find around AI and young people, and basically covered then in this report, which I hope you will all read if you haven't already, we covered 5 areas that I will give you some examples around. It doesn't mean that those are the only 5 areas that interest us. It doesn't mean that those are the 5 areas that will be the only ones that we ever talk about, but it meant that at that point when we started the project, those were the primary areas. And just to give you the 5 examples, because it's way too small up there, first one was education, the second one was around health and well-being, third one was about the future of work, fourth one was about privacy and safety, and the fifth one was about creativity and entertainment. Just 2 days ago, you might have seen this one already. My colleague, Berkman Klein, Executive Director Wiscasa, who is here with us today, also wrote this piece in Wire magazine that also is based on some of the findings and observations that were covered in the report, basically making a case for how we should include young people more in this debate from beginning to implementation. So the first area that we looked at in the report, again, is privacy and safety. And just to give you an example that also other colleagues will then later talk more about, we looked, for instance, at the educational context and issues around privacy there. And for instance, one example came up from Asia where we saw as an example that, for instance, several schools were incorporating sensors like these, so devices like this that should capture young people's attention while in school and kind of through an analysis in the back end decide if young people are awake and paying attention and otherwise help them increase their learning while at school, also giving teachers real-time updates and parents updates in 10-minute intervals. And so examples like this in the report highlight, for instance, questions, what is young people's autonomy around these new technologies, and will they have a certain say when it comes to these technologies around especially privacy, but other areas as well. So will they have a say about the data that is being collected? Will they have a say in what's happening to that data? Again, this just is a quick example. Many more questions are in the report in this section. Another area that is covered in the report is looking at health and well-being. And to give you there an example of what came up as we were doing the research, for instance, we were looking at natural language processing and how it can be used, for instance, to detect if young people are not well or are struggling or are in distress. I think that might be something Karuna will also mention. So I see, to a certain extent, a ton of potential in this area. Some of the questions that came up is, for instance, will AI systems like this, will they potentially, for instance, be able to reduce stigma around certain health issues because a broader range of young people will have access to these technologies, and also the adult society may come in contact with these. But then kind of on the other side, on the flip side, the question is, will these AI-based systems, will they be as culturally sensitive, maybe let's call it like that, to how young people express, for instance, emotional distress. Some of my work is based in the United States, where young people maybe more openly also say if they feel, if they don't feel good, while work I do, for instance, in Latin America, there it's much more difficult to say and to speak up if you have emotional struggles. And so will those systems actually be aware and sensitive to that? Within the education, there are countless examples. The first one that I mentioned is one of them, but the question is truly who will actually have access to these technologies? You name it, from personalized curricula to AI tutors to you name it. Who will actually get those? Will it be, as in many other cases, wealthy, privileged young people, or will it be everyone? And will it actually improve the learning and the education, or will it not? And what are we going to do about all the educators that basically also need to be trained and re-educated about these technologies and often fear or confront these technologies with a lot of fear and anxieties, and the big unknown is there. And then when we looked, for instance, at work, just again, because I don't want to spend too much time, you see in the media examples like this bringing up a lot of fear and also negative visions about the future, about automation and how it might remove many job opportunities. And for us, a question was, for instance, all these headlines and reports and this relatively uncertainty, or maybe not call it uncertainty, but the reports are really going from one statement, lots of jobs that won't exist and no longer be there when you finish your studies, to it's not that bad and it's not that extreme. But still, in the media, the discussions are making young people to a certain extent nervous about the future and what their careers and pathways. And so I think more work needs to be done in this field to better understand it. Same, again, that's also connected to the Wire article. How can we increase also young people's interest, again, into entering career paths that will then hopefully shape these new technologies. Across all topics, I think the biggest theme that we are concerned about at Youth and Media is the question of inclusion, inclusion of young people, but inclusion of different perspectives, thinking about inequalities and inequities, and will these new technologies be able to reduce some of these or actually make the gaps even bigger? And I'm excited that Steve particularly is also going to talk about the work we're now doing together around AI principles, guidelines, going from very theoretical things to more practical things, helping institutions, organizations, governments to think through this process and how can you actually do work in this space, being more mindful also of young people and their rights. So again, I personally have a ton of questions. I'm excited about your inputs and your questions and hope we can debate that either here today or then online or in different parts of the world. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Sandra. So as you mentioned now, we are going to move on to hearing from Steve Woslow, who is the digital policy specialist in UNICEF and my colleague. And he's going to tell you a little bit more about the initiative that we have just started in collaboration with Berkman Klein Center, with Government on Finland, World Economic Forum, IEEE, and Five Rights Organization, and a number of other organizations and experts that for the first time gathered in June this year to talk about how we can develop a set of policy guidance for industry and for the governments around children's issues and artificial intelligence, and how to turn these principles into practice. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Jasmina. Okay. Are the slides coming up? Okay, voila, thank you. So I was this week in Helsinki. We ran the first workshop into developing these policy guidance, these policy guidelines. And I wanted to just share with you two slides that my colleague presented, because they were quite good at making the idea of AI, an abstract idea, quite concrete. So we're going to meet two people. This is Emma. Emma is born today, so she will be 11 years old in 2030. And let's just think about the kind of future that we want for Emma, and then we'll look at Emma's sister. And this is just, it's a mental exercise, but bear with us. So Emma was born with a very rare cancer, but thanks to AI-powered technology, it was diagnosed early enough for life-saving treatment, and she can have a normal life. So she loves school, she loves learning, but she happens to live in a very remote part of Finland. So let's use the Finland example. But thanks to, again, AI-powered technologies and technology in general, she can have access to virtual tutors and have access to all the content and support that she needs. She is also living in a world where greenhouse gases have been reduced somewhat. I mean, this is a very wonderful utopia, but it's good to aim high. And that was thanks to machine learning and, again, AI-based systems to help us use energy more efficiently. Her dream is to run a tech company. She loves technology. She's been helped by technology. And so she has that opportunity. She's basically living in a world where older people have access to virtual content and opportunities. Right now, we know that only half the world actually has access and is online. So she's online the whole time, but she feels empowered, not kind of dominated by her online life. She's aware when a machine makes a decision over her life and when it's a person. And she knows that regardless, there's always somebody that she can talk to about decisions, or there's some sort of route of accountability. So no one uses her data unless she consciously shares it. And she feels that she trusts technology. So this is Emma. Okay. She's born today. So this is Emma's sister. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. Thank you. Okay. This is Emma's older sister. She's 15 years old today. So she also loves technology. In Finland, I, of course, realize that not the whole world is like Finland, but in Finland, 97% of kids between 9 and 17 have a smartphone. And they spend most of the time online. We know that 1/3 of all internet users are children, and Emma's sister is one of them. So she's already using AI systems today through her Facebook newsfeed, through her Instagram face filters that uses facial recognition, and through Alexa. And so she uses Alexa a lot, and she asks Alexa questions that perhaps she doesn't ask of her parents. She doesn't know which technologies are using AI and why. She doesn't feel like she has control over her data. Her data is kind of stored and sold and used in the same way that adults' data is used, because she's using the same systems that her parents and her peers use. She has friends who go to the schools, friends abroad, that Sandra showed a picture of, where there are cameras in the schools, not just for security, which is of course a noble kind of point, but also to measure concentration levels and learning levels. So she doesn't feel like she has any special protections in her current situation. And so these are the two personalities we're looking at. This is where we are today, and this is where we would like to be in 2030. And that's kind of an inspiration for the policy guidance, to think about what kind of changes do we need to make today to create these two different spaces. So we know that we need to focus more on children. As Yasmina said, this is the 30th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Children are the most vulnerable part of the population, but of course that's not their only quality. They also have the most potential. And so we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but on top of that we also had the Convention on the Rights of the Child, because children have special needs and special requirements. And that kind of thinking of special protections needs to be carried over into the digital world, and I know that's what many of us are working on here. So these are the four main types of rights that we have in the convention. I won't go into those now, but the good thing is we don't have to start at the beginning. There's a lot of great work being done. Here's some examples from UNICEF. There are many being done to protect children and to think about those special provisions for children. Designing for Child Rights is one. This is a report that Sandra also had up. It's done by Berkeley University, and it was commissioned by UNICEF. And it looks really at how children use AI systems and how that impacts on rights. And it has some great recommendations at the end. for corporations, for educators, for parents. The one that caught our eye was for governments, about integrating child rights into national plans. And so we wanted to better understand what national plans currently say about children and child rights, or what they don't say. So this is a report that was produced about a year ago by CFAR, which is a Canadian research institute, looking at countries that either have AI strategies or are developing those. And they divided in their analysis, they created these 8 kind of policy buckets. And you can just see very quickly that a lot of the attention goes onto research and industrial strategy and the next kind of cohort of AI talent versus inclusion, or using AI for good in government. So we continued this research, and we wanted to look at these same documents, but from a child lens perspective. And so these are the 4 main buckets that we chose. What do strategies say about cultivating children as a future workforce, so that AI pipeline, preparing children to live in a changing world, so that's teaching children to be conscious users of technology, and about the ethics and design principles, protecting child's data, privacy rights, and then better quality of services, so that could be in education or in health. And we found a fairly light touch. I mean, if the colors were dark, there'd be a significant amount of attention paid to those topics. So you see it's a fairly light touch for children. We looked at 19 ethics principles. Again, I mean, this is maybe not surprising, but here most of the focus is on protecting children's data and privacy, which is great, but perhaps not so strong in the other areas. And so really just, it was confirming what Sandra had found and what many others have found, that there isn't much attention given to AI in children, but we do believe that there needs to be. And so the policy guidelines want to really just focus on that niche of how does AI systems, how do they impact children, and how do we need to think as technology providers, as governments, as the UN, as civil society, think about what kind of provisions and protections and empowerments we need to put in place. So our plan is to develop this guidance and to pilot this guidance over 2 years. We will host workshops, like the one we just held in Helsinki 2 days ago. There are ones coming up in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America. And we'll launch the guidance at a high-level forum next June in Helsinki. So please give us input into the guidance. We want to consult as widely as possible. We're working with a number of partners who are advising us at this stage, Berkman Klein Center, the Five Rights Foundation, the World Economic Forum, IEEE. So this is our kind of advisory board, but we really want to get as many inputs as possible. And so I'll leave you with this. These are some draft principles. These are not new principles. You will recognize them if you're familiar with the AI principle space at all. And I keep hearing at conferences that there are now over 200 different AI principles and ethics, which is great. And luckily, they're all starting to look the same, like this. These are the kind of the headline: transparency, accountability, protection. What we've tried to do here is to think of the human adult, which is usually the person that one thinks of, and think of the human child. And what does that mean for transparency or explainability or inclusion when it's a child? So please join us on this journey. Come chat to me afterwards. And let's see how we can get as many inputs as possible into making this kind of work as kind of comprehensive as possible. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. And hopefully next year, this time at the next IGF, we will already have the first part of our journey completed with this policy guidance being drafted. And we just want to say we discussed earlier before this session with our colleagues from Berkman Klein that we want to make them as practical and pragmatic as possible, with as many examples of how do you actually apply these principles in practice and in different sectors and in different areas of a child's life and well-being. Now I'm turning over to our commentators who are going to give us a 5-minute comment on what they've heard, but also tell us a little bit more about their work and their involvement. So the first person is Armando Guillo, who used to be advisory to the Ministry of ICT in Colombia.
Well, thank you, Jasmina. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to the Berman Klein Center also and the IGF for organizing this panel and giving me the opportunity to show you a little bit more about the experience in Colombia. I had the opportunity to advise the Colombian government in the design of its AI strategy. This strategy is the first AI strategy in South America. It's the Compass 3975. So we call the documents that are approved by the president and its cabinet. And this is, I think, a very good example of how to try to, put into practice the principles and the ideas that had been shown by academia and by organizations as the UNICEF. So I have to say that the Youth and Artificial Intelligence Where We Stand report of the Berman Klein Center was very influential for us because it set some specific points that we consider were very important in order to design this kind of a strategy. So the future of work, that was essential. Education, we knew that AI plan, AI strategy for a country without a clear talent and an education strategy, well, it was not going to be very effective, and that is also on the report, and I think it's a matter to consider. And at the same time, we have this very big concern on how to develop and involve children into these more creative industries and creativity. We believe that creativity, as it is said in the report, is very important for this new stage of the fourth industrial revolution. And I think one of the most interesting things about the report is that it says, this quote that I have here in the presentation is that, like, obstacles to the adoption of AI-powered technologies in under-resourced schools and underrepresented homes could exacerbate existing gaps within the youth population with respect to access to AI systems and the skills to utilize them. And that's one of the biggest concerns we have in Colombia as a developing country, of course, that we didn't have enough resources to provide to the students, to our schools, and that we have to do something because AI, of course, is going to be influential in the world, and we want Colombia and Colombians to have a safe and a prosperity in the future. So we had to do something about that. And that's why the main guidelines of this strategy that also answer to many of the topics and issues that were in that report. I can describe mainly 4 points on the strategy now that Colombia is implementing that are essential. So we have, first of all, developing skills and implementing AI in schools. So the first thing is that we believe that it's very difficult to say, like, this is the set of skills that is required in order to deal with AI. AI is changing all the time, so we have to be open to this experimentation stage. We have to be open to discover that this technology is changing, that teachers, the students have to evolve and have to adapt to all these technologies, and that's why the strategy says, like, we have to promote like these kind of experiments in schools, and that's something challenging, that's something new, but that's something we believe was quite innovative for the Colombian education system, and we think that is a good example for Latin America. Like, we have to consider a new approach to education and a new approach in which we still don't know the whole set of skills that is required. At the second time, we wanted to, as I said, to promote creativity through non-conventional learning environments. So the Ministry of Education was especially committed that there were non-conventional educational environments that were used and that were now implemented in Colombia, getting out of this traditional system and trying to promote different models and methodologies, co-creation, letting children be more involved in the construction of these curriculums. So that was one of the biggest steps that we have in that strategy. Then we have another point that is to identify and support children with high performance capability. And this is going to be a very important task. We believe that high-performance students, especially on some specific topics such as basic sciences, math, they're going to be very relevant to design and develop AI and to help Colombia and the Latin American countries to develop their own AI systems. But the thing is that we need to identify as soon as possible these children, but also to be careful not to discriminate other children that are not having these perhaps high performance. And how are we going to answer to the expectations of those that have a high performance and those that are not having one? And that's also related with this last fourth point, and is the future of work. What is going to happen with these children that perhaps, or this young population that consider that they don't have all the skills required in order to be productive in the future. And that's why we believe that in the strategy there is a specific action of cooperation and collaboration with the private sector. We want to understand from the private sector which are those skills required, where are children going to, like skills that we'll need to develop in order to become productive. And we can only know that if the private sector is also telling us which are those skills. So we believe that that was very important in this strategy, and that's why we also consider that we are still learning. We don't have all the answers, but this is the first step in order to start developing those skills, and for children in Colombia to start getting the proper education and the proper knowledge in order to face the fourth industrial revolution and to deal with AI systems. So as I said, this is the Compass document that is our digital transformation strategy and artificial intelligence strategy, that as in the illustration you can see the idea is to reduce inequalities, gaps, and to try that all children in Colombia can benefit from AI, not just some with the resources in order to interact with this technology, but we want children in Colombia, and because of children's rights, and we believe in the Convention on Children's Rights, that they can have access to the best possible education and to the skills that are really going to help them in the future. So that's mainly the strategy, and that's what Colombia is now working on, and the Colombian government is working now on the implementation of this plan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And great to hear about the Colombia example. And now I'm turning to Sabelo Mkhlambi. Did I pronounce it properly? Yes. You are a fellow from Berkman Klein Center. Mike, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and an honor to share with you an African perspective on how we expect this technology will affect our livelihoods. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to do some of this research at the Berkman Klein Center and to work with some colleagues here as well. So it's a pleasure to be here. When we're looking at the African continent, almost half of the population is under 18. That's a significant amount. And 70% of the population is under 30. And in 2026, Sub-Saharan Africa will have the greatest amount of children under 18 in anywhere in the world. In addition to this, we're facing extreme challenges. Climate change has devastated the livelihood of the continent, the economies, and the well-being and the security of the children. As we're looking at the informal employment which we see in the continent, almost half of the population is working in vulnerable employment. And so this makes us wonder, what is the future of work in the continent? Will the children, will the youth have jobs within the economy, within the continents, or will we see this continuation of young Africans taking dangerous routes to go to Europe, to go to North America, to try to find better livelihoods? And so this is of great concern and something that we have to look into. Other disparities, of course, exist within healthcare, within education, financial and digital inclusion. And within these disparities, we see gender inequality. There's a disparity between young girls and women in how they access and use the internet, how they use mobile devices, and how they use technology. The use of AI has the potential to either worsen these disparities or to try to resolve them. And to do so, to fully realize the potential and the benefits of AI, we must seek the potential of AI while keeping in mind the potential harms of algorithmic technology, and also the underlying power asymmetries that exist within the continent. In the spirit of Ubuntu, which is the philosophy that we uphold in the African continent, we must seek this potential with meaningful inclusion and dialogue of children. I was very excited to hear some of the speakers talking about, dialogue, inclusion, openness, and treating the youth as experts who can, influence how we build AI technology. So that's very heartening. And this includes collaboration, it includes cooperation, openness, and we must empower children to become successful members of the community. In the African continent and elsewhere, it is often said it takes a village to raise a child. We are that village. We have a responsibility to the youth, a responsibility to their success, and a responsibility to create a more equal society, including in how we respond to the climate crisis, in the creation and also in the creation of safer internet platforms. So I'm excited to hear what we will say about that. Excuse me. We have a responsibility to the youth and to ensure that the future generations have a society and environment where they can grow and fully realize their potential and human dignity as being humans. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. These are very inspirational words, and particularly for us in UNICEF. And one thing I would really like to emphasize here is that in this process of developing of this policy guidance, we are working closely with Berkman Klein Center on carrying out a series of consultations with young people and with children, because we see them not only as those who can benefit from AI, but also as co-creators and a very important stakeholder group in these discussions. So, as I said, next time we will be IGF, we'll also have some of these young people with us, but maybe we'll show you a short video, 1 minute afterwards if Steve finds it, following our next commentator and a speaker, Karuna Nain, who is a global safety policy lead with Facebook.
Thank you, Jasmina, and thank you so much, Sandra, Stephen, for having me here. So I wanted to use my 5 minutes to talk about 2 specific examples of how we use AI on Facebook and on our platforms to A, keep children safe, but also to make sure that we are giving people an appropriate or a customized experience on our services. So let me start with the example on safety. Many of you in this room will know of our work in this space. Keeping children safe is something that we consider one of our foremost responsibilities. And sorry, I'll get closer to the mic. Okay, let me try. So we've been using photo matching technologies for many years to detect previously reported images that are uploaded onto our platforms to make sure that we take them down at the time of upload and file a report with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Last October, we announced that we are now able to use the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence in 2 additional ways to keep children safe. First, we are able to use the power of AI and machine learning to detect previously unreported images of child nudity. So far, we were only able to detect content that had already been reported. This is a huge step forward because now we can detect content that hasn't been reported, and is child nudity. At Facebook, we actually have more restrictive community standards around child nudity. So even if that image has been shared because a parent or a grandparent thinks that their child is cute, we would tend to err on the side of caution and take down that image just because we know we're a social network and there is scope for other people to use that image in ways that it wasn't intended. But we are, and if the image is exploitative, it's being shared in an exploitative context, we would then file a report with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as is required of us. The second use of AI and machine learning in this space is to detect accounts that are engaging in potentially inappropriate contacts with minors. And as you can imagine, if we do find these accounts, the machine learning flags these accounts, it is sent to a human reviewer to check and investigate what is going on. And if we find that there is something going on which is exploitative in nature, again, we would file a report with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So this is one example of how we are able to use AI and machine learning to keep Facebook safer and keep the internet safer as well. The second example I want to share is more around customization, or giving people a experience that is pleasant on Facebook, making sure that they can personalize Facebook. For those of you who use Facebook, when you come onto our platform, you usually go to your news feed. Your news feed is the space where you see your posts, photographs, links that your friends, your family have shared, pages that you followed on Facebook, news accounts that you've chosen to follow. The newsfeed is really based on signals that you've been giving us. We use 3 signals to help us prioritize what content we should be showing you in your newsfeed. Number 1, who posted it? Are these people you tend to engage more with on our platform? Number 2, the type of content. Is it a photo? Is it a video? Is it a link? Is it just an ordinary post? Maybe I'm living in India where internet bandwidth is very low in that neighborhood which I'm in. So Facebook doesn't want to try and show you a video, which would be a really terrible experience. It would be buffering. It wouldn't be great. So that's the second indicator that we want to try and use. And third is your interactions with similar posts. So if you've been engaging more with those kinds of posts, we want to show you similar content because you've given us a clear indicator that's the type of content you want to see. We've been focusing on 2 specific things here. One, giving people more control. So not only can you customize these preferences by going into your preferences menu on Facebook, you can actually do it at the point of every post. Right next to each and every post, you can click on the drop-down menu and tell Facebook that you don't want to see similar content going forward. Or you want to check, why am I even seeing this? Why is Facebook showing me this? We want to give you more controls and more transparency around that. The second thing we've been focusing on in terms of transparency is anytime we make a big change in our newsfeed ranking, we put out a newsroom post and we make sure that we are being transparent around it. So many of you may remember at the start of the year, we made a huge step forward where we said we are going to downrank clickbait, downrank content which you had clearly told us is not high quality content. You don't want to see us. And we want to make sure that people know when we are making these steps forward and put out transparent information about those. So we've been focusing both on giving people controls, but also being more transparent around how these technologies really work so that you have granular level controls and can really customize these experiences for yourself. So I'm hoping with these 2 examples, it really frames the conversation for a practical thought around what these policies should be. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Karuna, for sharing this. And I know that because of the first example you gave us, the reporting of child abuse images have increased dramatically, and it helped identify children who were victimized, but also to catch the perpetrators with the law enforcement services. Do we have a video? So we have a short 1-minute video where you will see a youth activist actually who attended our workshop in June talking about AI and children, and then we'll open this for discussion.
AI is a new and promising technology that is going to eventually affect all of us, and everyone should have a say in it. AI is being developed by adults. We need to make sure that these adults think about what children would need while developing it.
Okay, that's it, and we even have a hashtag. So if you're tweeting about this session, please use this hashtag and get in touch with us. But now we have about 20 minutes for questions and answers and any comments. Please introduce yourselves. Yes, so we have somebody over there.
Hi, my name is Amitabh. I work in India on online safety with an organization called Social Media Matters. Thank you for the amazing presentations. Something which was there in the first slide is pretty much where my question is. How does the panel see the role of parents in this extremely important right of children, as AI still remains a very magical term for most of the parents out there. And when it comes to children, especially in India, children's rights pretty much start at home, and parents play a very important role in it.
Thank you. Shall we take a couple more questions if we have, and then turn back to the panelists?
Thank you, all very interesting. So I work for ECPA International. My name is Marie-Laure Lemineur, and our mission is to tackle the sexual exploitation of children. So basically, we're looking at harm online. To explain to you why I'm going to ask the questions I'm going to ask. So we do acknowledge that there are tools, AI-based tools that are being developed, and this is, of course, to be welcomed, and such as the ones you were mentioning, Karuna. And we look forward to having more solutions to be able to detect and take down materials, etc., and anticipate harm. But there are broader, in parallel to that, I think we also should look at broader governance issues related to those tools. And basically what we're doing here, we're moving towards a system where we are delegating human decision-making to algorithms. And when it comes to children, I think this deserves to have a closer look at what are the implications for children, and I believe that's what we're all doing collectively. There is a particular topic that is worrying me, which is data bias. Specifically, data is at the heart of AI systems. And when we think of the solutions and the type of harm that is done to children and the data that is available at country level and in databases, for example, images, and I think of the database of Interpol of images and predominantly portraying victims with ethnic profile that is predominantly white, same for offenders coming from the Western world, because of different factors, because those who are feeding this database are predominantly from the Western world. So if, for example, Interpol would develop an AI tool, then the data that would feed this tool would be influenced by what is portrayed on the images. So what would be the implication? Perhaps, then they wouldn't be able to detect other, children who are from other regions and offenders. So this is a very practical example, and this is one of my worry. And the other one, and the last one, sorry, to finish, is that I'm observing a trend where companies are, each one of them, like we have Google, we have Facebook, etc., developing tools, which is very good. But I'm sensing that this is also moving us towards a model where there is a fragmentation of the protection of children. And in a way, I'm just wondering whether we should create a pool of open sourced tools that we would, agree, all of us agree that this is for common good, and instead of having each company using those tools, developing it, then we could, share it and make it available in other regions for other companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these suggestions and comments. Is there any other question? Oh, there are two people at the back, and then we'll turn to the panelists. Yes. Oh, you don't have a mic.
My name is Clara Rappel. I'm from IEEE. My question would be for Facebook. If particularly you make a distinction between users, of a user being a child, if you are recognizing a child being a child, and if you make any distinction in the way you are handling the data of the children? And lastly, if there is a way, once that child gets adult, to to set it to 0, for instance, so that, let's say, a profile that is being set up as a child or a teenager is not perpetuated once that child becomes an adult.
Thank you. And Anjan?
Thank you very much. My name is Anjan Bose from UNICEF. I want to react to Marie-Laure's point and kind of build on that. My initial question to Karuna was when you mentioned about detection using AI of not known images, right? And obviously the algorithms will be trained enough with data sets to understand that it's a child who's, maybe the nudity plays a significant part in the decision making. And as Marie-Laure pointed out, that there would be human intervention required, and I'm sure that's the current policy, to not only rely on AI. But my response to Marie-Laure's second bit is, I think I kind of differ slightly in opinion in terms of how Interpol is managing that database, because it's already, I don't think the purpose of the AI on the existing ICSI database would be to, find new images, because they are not using AI to detect similar, images out there. So I'm not completely, sure how that conflict would come in terms of the existing database with known images. But I completely agree with you that when it comes to scouting the web for detection of unknown images, and if that's something that Interpol or other agencies would be wanting to implement going forward, we need to be cautionary in terms of using AI alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjan. So a lot of questions for Facebook, but let's turn first to Steve and Sandra with a question about parents, and also if you want to add a little bit about these other issues that we discussed around data and tools for detecting protection. What are your views? And then
I mean, I find the question very valid, and it's an important question. I do think we have to look at the whole ecosystem. It can't just be the focus just on youth, but youth at the center, and then looking what are kind of the humans and support structures around that young individual, where obviously parents are key, but also educators are key, and broader society. And I agree with you that in some cultures, parents have to be involved and have to be there probably from the beginning, but in other cultures, it might be other adults who are in charge of raising the child or this young person. And I must say, for instance, at Youth and Media, we also do significant work in communities that it's more complex. So you may have different adults that are distributing by whom you're raised. So I'm sometimes cautious to overemphasize the role of parents, because around the world the structures are very different and the situations are very different. And if we overemphasize that, we may again disadvantage those who are already most disadvantaged to a certain extent. So, but I think the question is very valid, and adults around youth are extremely important.
Just very quickly, I'll just build on what Sandra said. That the ecosystem, there's a human ecosystem, but there's also the technology ecosystem and the economic ecosystem. And so, your point about the data not being representative of all children in the world, or of all people, is very valid. And that comes down to the access, the digital divide in a sense, and the different levels of access, the different levels of cost. And so that data doesn't exist. And our colleagues in New York in the innovation team, they are trying to address this because they need a lot of that data for the actual AI systems to improve services for children. And so beginning to look at kind of data commons or data pools where the data is safely and safely treated, but begin to address that. And just quickly, your point about delegating responsibility to algorithms, that's a really good point. And hopefully, these principles of transparency and accountability are some buffer against that. I think Facebook does it very well, where you use the algorithm for what it's good at, and then when you need the human, you bring in the human. So hopefully we always keep those kind of safe measures or kind of protective measures in place to make sure that we don't just give over completely where we shouldn't. Thank you.
Karuna, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to build on what Stephen just said, because I think, with the volume at which the internet is being used and content is being generated, there's a space for AI to even help in making sure that the human intervention happens at the appropriate time. So one of the ways we use AI, for instance, Sandra mentioned around, things like suicide prevention, is within the reporting queues, there can be a lot of noise. Can we use the power of AI to determine if there is a certain post that is a more credible threat, bring it to the top of the stack so that the human reviewer gets to it first and does not, get to it when it's too late. So I think there's a space for combining the power of machine learning and AI with the power of human intervention to get people support at the right and appropriate junctures. So I received questions around data bias, around delegating to tech, which we've just managed, around fragmentation of the protection of children, how are we thinking about building that external ecosystem, and finally around data. So I'm going to try and get to each and every one of those. Let me start with the data question. So Facebook and all of our platforms, we don't allow people below the ages of 13 to set up accounts on our platform. We do rely on stated age, but we have some protection systems built in. So if someone comes and tries to set up an account, gives us an age which is below the age of 13, we'll give them a message saying that they aren't eligible for our platform yet. They'll try and enter a different age to game around our system. Because we can use cookies, we can let them know that actually we know that they've already tried and they aren't eligible to set up an account on our platform. So we try and make sure that we are getting people only above the age of 13, but we do rely on stated age. We, I think 2 years back, did a whole series of roundtables around the US to just hear from parents on what their needs around tech are. Like, how do they see tech playing a role in their lives and fostering the parent-child relationship? Because different parents have different needs. There are parents who work 3 jobs, 2 jobs. They use technology to stay connected with their kids. We wanted to really hear from them on what are they looking for. And we heard a lot of feedback from parents that they were lending their phones to their kids to speak to their grandparents. We heard from military families how they use, phones and messaging services to stay connected with their kids when they were sent out on duty. And so we launched something called Messenger Kids because we really wanted to make sure that we are building for parents. We've taken a very slow and measured approach to launching Messenger Kids because it is meant for younger children. Children below the ages of 13, we want to collect minimal data because that's what we are being very conscious of here. So the data for both Messenger and Kids and Facebook is actually stored very separately and it's kept apart. But the goal was really to make sure that we are responding to needs of families. We've just launched it in 1 or 2 countries since because each country that we launch in, we want to make sure that we are speaking to families, hearing from them on what their needs are and really catering to what that community wants from technology. And the reason I give you that example is because we do need to take a very different approach to data when we are building for people below the age of 13 versus when we are building from 13 to 18. And this is a constant conversation we are having around what is age appropriate, because children can be developmentally different as well. Great, so I'm going to jump to my next question because I think you asked some very valid questions around data bias, around, bringing an external ecosystem and making sure we are not fragmenting how we approach child protection. So in terms of data bias, most platforms, at least I can speak for the ones that we operate at Facebook, are global. 4 out of 5 people who use Facebook come from outside the US. The data that we have really reflects this diversity. The data that we use to train our artificial intelligence and machine learning systems also reflects this diversity of our user base. It is something that we are constantly being very conscious of, because we will not be able to catch the volumes of content which we are proactively detecting if we aren't training it on diverse data sets. We also work with organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who in turn work with 100 countries around the world through their VPN system. So we need to have a global approach, as you very rightly said, because some of these crimes cross borders. We do not want to recreate the wheel, because the burden on us as platforms also becomes really high. If every country has a different system, we need to make sure our technology is complying with that. So we are constantly thinking about how we can build out that external ecosystem. One of my favorite programs at Facebook, and Marilla, you're very familiar with it, is a child safety hackathon, where we bring together the tech community, nonprofits who work in this space, to think about what the next generation technology is. Facebook has been open sourcing some of the technology we use in-house. We recently open sourced the video hashing and photo hashing technology we use, so that other companies, smaller organizations, nonprofits, don't need to create these technologies and can just leverage our work in this space. So I hope I answered all of those questions. I speed read through the last ones, but I'm around if you all have more questions after this as well.
So we have 1 minute on data.
I answered the data one first.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Karuna. I'm sorry for interrupting. We will have time, and I know. Oh, sorry, we will have. Hopefully, you can talk to our panelists after this session. But I also want to give the floor to Sabelo and Armando if they have some last comments. Starting with you.
I wanted to emphasize what the colleague said earlier about the harms and the power structures, asymmetries in the Western influencing technology. What I would like to first start by talking about is we now have the potential to fully track our youth since from birth till they live life, using ever increasingly powerful technology. So what does that mean? Are we eventually turning them into commodifiable entities, agents, do all of this tracking from birth throughout the entire livelihoods? And to reiterate your point, I think in order to create AI with the youth, we should, in general, level the playing field. Most of the large internet platforms that dominate the internet usage, of course, Western, and this carries certain designs and how, and certain ways of seeing the world. And AI technology in the global South must be localized, even open sourced, and we must consider the economic power symmetries that large platforms have when they go and they offer, free internet services. What does that do to the local creators who want to compete, who want to make their own platforms? It becomes a dangerous place to have a few actors dominate the internet, especially dominate the experience of most of the internet population.
Thank you. Very, very good point and valid.
Thank you. No, well, I think that this panel has been very helpful in order to also consider, and for the governments in Latin America, like the Colombian government, to consider the role of children in the design of these policies, in implementation. How are we going to listen to them? How are we going to create those spaces of interaction? I think that's something that definitely we have to consider in order to create also and to build also some more of a pragmatic approach to the principles and to children's rights. That's something that definitely we need. And of course, this other issue that has been discussed about privacy is also very important for us. We are also concerned about it, but we think that it's very important that, especially on children's privacy, there is a lot of evidence, and we want policy-based evidence also there. So that's also important to have case studies, that we have more information when we are thinking about the regulation or specific measures from the government coming into children's protection. So that's something that we are also very aware of, and we're expecting to have all that evidence and data that will be very helpful.
Thank you, everybody. So we've come to the end of our session, but this is really just the beginning of a journey, and I hope you stay in touch with us, provide your comments, inputs. You can talk to us after this. Steve was very cleverly not put his email there, so nobody can write to him. So everybody will be writing to you, Sandra. But I also want to say, I hope that the next IGF and other forums like this one, and congresses and conferences, when we discuss AI, we also discuss children, because there are several panels here around AI, and this is the only one actually that addresses issues related to children. We don't want to be only talking to like-minded people who come to our sessions, but we want to be part of the opening panels, and we want to have more children's voices included in the mainstream programs of IGF. And I just want to say, this has also been a really gender-balanced panel, if you include me, 3 women and 3 men, which is also a novelty at IGF. Thank you all for your participation today.